Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HCD VidCast, episode 15 of our curious conversations that we have. This time we will be talking about eye tracking and what it is, what you can do with it. As always, my name is Michelle Niedziela, VP of Research and Innovation at HCD Research, and I am joined by Kathryn Ambroze. Kathryn.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. If you're new here, we're thrilled to have you, and if you're a returning friend, it's great to have you back. I am Kathryn Ambrose, the Manager of Behavioral and Marketing Sciences with our Research and Innovation team at HCD Research. And eye tracking is something we do implement quite frequently, so I'm excited to chat about it today. But before we get started,
it's a popular tool, and before we jump into it, let's let those of you that are new or maybe have forgotten who we are. We are HCD Research. We are a research provider, consumer research provider and research house. We use all sorts of different approaches to get a holistic understanding of how consumers respond to perceiving things, evaluating things, and responding to things out there that you might be putting out there. We use anything from neuroscience to psychology to traditional research methodologies, from the early stages of exploration all the way through the end stages of product value validation, from product development all the way through marketing. And our approaches can be done anywhere. So some we do online, some we do in person, and they can be done globally, anywhere that we can take equipment if need be. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the conversation where we're going to talk about what is eye tracking. So eye tracking itself is a measure. It's a tool, right? So it's a tool that's measuring where your eyes are looking or what you're paying attention to visually. And I make that distinction, and we're going to probably bring that up a lot in today's conversation, the difference between like paying attention to something and visually paying attention to something, right?
Exactly. I think that's great to bring that up really at the front of the conversation, because eye tracking in its simplest form, it's really measuring points of gaze versus points in motion of your eye relative to the head. And I think that this methodology has definitely grown over time and has been improved upon and advanced. As you can see in the corner of this slide, the early eye tracking involved actually contact lenses, where there was an opening for the pupil that was attached to a lever, and it actually moved the pen over a smoke drum, and the pen moved as the eye position changed, and
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very innovative and not something I think I would have invented myself.
But it's interesting. I think this drawing is really important because there are certain patterns and there's a lot of psychology to what we pay visual attention to, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, when we look at a face, we're immediately drawn to faces, and we immediately try to identify combinations of eyes and mouth, right? Whether we're looking at the front of a car and we see that the headlights look like eyes and the grille looks like a mouth, we're always looking for faces. And so there are very distinct patterns that we'll show, but you also see here that there's a lot of movement, right? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Exactly. And things are very much influenced too by what task is being provided. What's influencing a task is what people are going to look towards. And you are absolutely correct in saying it's really eyes, nose, and mouth that people focus on when trying to identify faces. But we can really harness that information and use it to help understand where people's visual attentions are looking, not just for faces, but for other stimuli as well. Yeah. So,
So like on the left, we're seeing the first stages of eye tracking. On the right is close to what we do now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's advanced a lot. And what we do in today's world is there's a near infrared light from these cameras that are used to reflect off your eyes. And the camera that has these illuminators actually capture the eye movement, and then we learn the patterns through that. So using that information, there's software algorithms that can calculate exactly where the participant's eye is, reflection patterns, and gaze points, which we're going to touch upon as we keep going with our conversation.
But, it is important that this is really camera based, right? Yeah. So what happens, so what we saw in the previous slide was a lot of eye movement. There's a lot of activity that goes on our eyes. Our eyes are never really just focused on one spot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Even when we are staring, burning a hole into something, as they say, right? You do have these natural fluctuations of movement.
Right. And that's like you said, eye is always moving. And that's actually something that's so incredible, is that the way that we don't always recognize that our vision is actually suppressed sometimes. And our brain is just incredible that we can put in additional information around us. But that's a separate conversation. It's the whole point is bringing it back to the idea of movement. And the very fundamental measure in eye tracking is a gaze point. And that's just basically one sample captured by the eye tracker. And when there's multiple gaze points in that one location, that's when you then have something known as a fixation. So
fixation is when you really are sort of truly looking at something, like taking that information, focusing on it. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's reading that single word. So if you have a short single word, say like you're just reading the word gaze, or you're just reading the word point, having those multiple gaze points then creates that fixation. But like you mentioned, our eyes are constantly in motion. So going from point A to point B, there's a name for that. And it's funny, before this recording, I actually Googled the correct way to pronounce it.
All right, what did Google tell you?
Google suggests that it's saccade, even though I always called it saccade, but
I've heard both. I have definitely heard both. So we're going to go with saccade today.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
because, almighty Google has told us. But, I've definitely heard both. So don't feel bad if you have said saccade as well. So no big deal there. But, some people think that there's a lot of reasoning behind having this traveling, these saccades, right? Some of it is that your brain is sort of getting the position of things, right? So it's like sort of gazing out the edges, and you got to bounce around to really understand where things are located, because a lot of times when you do focus on things, the rest of in the periphery do tend to go out of focus. And so being able to understand your surroundings, your eyes are constantly moving, right?
Right, exactly. And that is going to influence the way that we perceive things too. If we only saw, if our eyes didn't do that, we would be on information overload constantly.
Right.
So it's really just a way to make us function in our world more efficiently. But being able to track these eye movements through these cameras is really essential, because it shares a person's trajectory of where their vision is taking them. And if you're recording that through when somebody's performing a task, it does give us that information about visual attention.
Absolutely. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go about tracking eye movement, right? So let's talk a little bit about those. So the types of eye trackers, we got a couple here. We have, ones that you wear, they're glasses, not contact lenses, like you saw in the beginning, but glasses that you could just fit on over your current glasses, or just, on like you would regular glasses. There's ones that you can actually mount under a screen, right? So that's a camera that's actually looking at you. And then a third is more remote, right? So this is often used with tablets?
Yep. Yes, exactly. So that's put onto a desktop, very easily just placed on there. And then with all of these, there is this period of calibration, which we'll discuss. But more frequently than not, you're more likely to see the wearable eye tracker and the remote eye tracker. The tower-mounted eye tracker is frequently used in academia.
It looks like a more academic setup, something that you probably wouldn't have people come in to do if doing consumer research, right?
Right, exactly. And I think the reason that it's used more frequently in that realm is just because it does guarantee a very consistent stimulus, and you also have this the option of having an automatic time lock, and then because of that you have high frequency. So for something like a remote eye tracking or a wearable, you're going to have, depending on the constraints of your research, if you're doing it remote, your eye tracking will most likely have, you'll need a higher sample of people because throwout might be a little bit higher.
And that's an important thing to bring up, I think, with any tool, right? That you kind of get what you pay for, and each tool has its limitations. So if you think about the wearable one, the kind of data you get from that can be really dirty, right?
Yes.
Because it's a lot to muddy through. There's a lot more head movement, a lot more noise sort of in the system, right? So it can be more difficult to code.
Yeah, I always joke with the wearable eye tracker that its pro is its con, and that's that the person has extra freedom. So
yes,
it's awesome. They can roam around.
So you get a more naturalistic sort of measure, and you get someone, say, walking through a store, but now you've got the noise of not having them stationary and fixated, right?
Exactly. Yep. And
of course, the tower mounted, you're going to have a ton of control, right?
Yes.
You got control of everything there. It's not very natural at all. You have a little more natural movement where the person can move their head around with the remote, but of course, then you have that added noise.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely pros and cons to all of these different types of cameras that can be used, but the commercial devices tend to use all of them use the near infrared light to create those reflections that are easy to pick up. And having that near infrared light, it does help to create higher sampling rate, and therefore, you are able to get some really useful data.
Yeah. So let's think about that, how that works. Here's what it looks like if you're wearing the glasses, right? So
exactly.
This is the view, the point of view of the person wearing them, and the information that is being recorded on the camera on the glasses is looking directly at the eye. So you can see there the circles have dots in them, and that should be indicating sort of where the pupil is going to, right?
Exactly. And this is actually this setup right here. If you look at the overall screen of this picture, the researcher is able, it's very meta. The researcher is able to watch what the participant is looking at through their eye tracking glasses. And you have to make sure that the eyes are really being seen. And like you had mentioned, there's that glint around the eyes, and that's ensuring that the camera is accurately picking up where the pupil is looking, and that's done through the process of calibration. So if we want to just touch on calibration really quickly, it's just this idea that when the participant is directed to look at a specific part on the screen, you're able to correct a little bit the gaze points and the gaze point calculations. So that way you're really ensuring that where the person's visual attention is, it's lined up with what
it's basically establishing that connection between what you're recording from the camera and where the pupils are, right? That you're actually recognizing them. Okay, so we've done our eye tracking with whatever tool it might be. And now what does output look like? What can we learn from it? So we see a couple of things here in the pictures, right? So the first one with the woman, you can see all the points that the people fixated on, right? So these are all the points that the person looked at. And then there's another type of information, which is with the bottles there, which is looking at a shelf where you get a heat map, right? And that heat map is showing sort of where they, kind of spent most of their time looking. So red would be where they burned in the most, green less so, right? And if there's no color added to that, then they didn't see it at all, or rather they didn't have their eyes focused on it at all.
Right, so there's the lack of visual attention in those areas, right?
Yeah, and then there's another thing you can do with the image on the right that you can see a shelf. And here, what is done is you sort of code all the products. So in this way, then you can see looking at specific brands and then behaviorally code if any of them were hit, right? How long did it take them to notice that particular brand and as a whole, and also how much total time did they spend looking at the brand? This can definitely be, it's a different way of looking at the same sort of data, but organizing it more behaviorally, right?
Right, and with this idea of almost like you said, suggested coding places, there's also areas of interest is what it's referred to. And it's a place, it's a sub-region that can really be subjective based on what you're trying to answer in your question. So for this situation, it could be particular brands.
Right. So like, is your brand performing better on shelf, and getting noticed than your competitor?
Exactly. And with those areas of interest, with those AOIs, you're able to find further information, and you can kind of see from the chart above it that you can learn things like time to first fixation. So how long it really took for for the participant to view and really focus in on one particular area. And to pair with that, there's also the total fixation duration. So it's that length of time that they spent on that, or were they just looking at it, looked away, and maybe they look back, So all this information is very useful in understanding how people are really processing what they're looking at.
So there's actually a lot of information that you can get from doing eye tracking. Although I think that when people think of eye tracking, the first thing that comes to mind are these heat maps. And the heat maps are okay, but honestly not that informative, right? You're not getting some of this other information that quite honestly tells you a lot more, right?
Right. So heat maps are a great data visual. It gives you a nice, concise snapshot of what's happening. But if you really want that fundamental information, it does help to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, and you have all the information there if you've done, eye tracking from a reliable camera. Yeah. So let's think about visual attention. So there's that difference that we mentioned in the beginning between looking at something visually with your eyes and actually paying actual cognitive attention to it, right?
Right.
Because there's no way that we can use eye tracking alone to say that the person is really paying attention to something. And I think some of the examples I like to give is like the image here. When you daydream, you could very well be staring at a wall for 10 minutes with never having thought of the color of the wall. I could ask you the color wall, you may not even remember it, right?
Right, exactly.
Or I think another thing is like, asking people if they notice something on their typical drive home, right? They're, looking at the road, but that doesn't mean they saw everything on the road. Right.
Oh, absolutely. And especially if I say to my sisters all the time when I'm trying to explain this to them, that you could be replaying the entire Game of Thrones last episode and thinking about something that's really, really bugging you from it, and still have your eyes on the screen during the lecture. And your teacher would never know that you're not paying attention, but you could be in a completely different world, literally.
Absolutely. But you're staring right at the teacher.
Right. Yeah. So what does staring really tell us? It's really important to pair visual attention with other measures. And we do say this really, really frequently.
For a good reason.
Right. But it's important to mention that, that there have been behavioral trends that have been noticed. For example, if you're staring versus having a saccade shift, people research has shown that saccades usually follow shifts of attention. So you could be looking at something without paying attention to it, and that's the staring idea that we've suggested. But if you look away from it and you're following what the teacher's saying, it suggests that, you are following the sequence of of what's being instructed to you.
But if you had relied on heat maps, you would have thought the person was paying a lot of attention.
Exactly. Yep. So it really comes back to taking that extra information and diving in and building that context and building that story from your data.
Yeah, so I think with all the tools we always talk about, it is really important to take these things a step further than just the surface, because it can be very important on sort of trying to interpret the results.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why pairing it with other research metrics like surveys is really, really helpful and gives us that overall, that overall understanding.
So given all of that understanding, what can you use eye tracking for? All sorts of things. We've named a few already, right?
Yeah. So eye tracking, it's really useful to understand those covert human reactions, and it gives you that understanding of, are people looking where you want them to look, say during a commercial? Is your logo really being viewed, or is it maybe being overlooked? So that kind of question can really be useful with eye tracking.
Yeah, for like example, in looking at ads, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking at an ad and you want to make sure that they've actually seen your logo, right? I always, talk about Super Bowl ads where the Super Bowl ad was very interesting, but I can't remember what the brand was, right?
Right. And that's a waste of money on their part. That's
total waste of money. So you want
know.
to make sure people are actually seeing when your logo comes up on the screen. And also being able to match other measures. You have some other measures that are here, like the biometrics, right? You can pair the biometric physiological reactions with what they're seeing on the screen, or maybe what they're seeing on the shelf, whatever it might be.
Exactly. And another really good application of eye tracking could be with websites. So there's understanding what path a person is taking while they're navigating a website could be very useful in helping you to build your website, to nudge them in a certain direction.
Or are their eyes being led in different directions?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many potential places for this to really be useful.
Because you can really see if someone's eyes are really jumping all over the place, they might be having trouble finding what they need to find, right? But if they are, much more streamlined, you can sort of see that UX, right? The user experience that they're having with the website. I think with packaging is another example as well, right? So, what are people seeing when they look at a package of, shampoo or, some household cleaner or whatever it might be? Are they looking at the brand logo? Are they seeing the information? That's another space where, real estate is very expensive, right? There's not a lot of space on a package, and whatever you put on there needs to be important information. So making sure that whatever they're seeing is really useful and meaningful.
Exactly. So this is just a really quick overview of eye tracking to give you a taste of some of the uses of it and to see where it would be really applicable. We do, like always, have plenty of sources that we could provide if you're interested. There's white papers on this topic, as well as conversations that we'd be more than happy to have. So please do subscribe, like, comment, and reach out to us if you have any further questions.
But yeah, please look below the video here, like the video, ask us a question even on this platform that you're viewing it on. Subscribe, contact us. We'd love to chat with you. So once again, thank you everybody for joining, and we hope you will join us again next time for our next awesome conversation. Until then, have an awesome day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.